Hi guys, it's Tamara here from Draw a Fence with you again for another episode of What the Form. Today we're going to be talking about a form that your customers probably won't request from you, but that will change the way you handle the estimating process, and that is a site visit report. So if this is something you're interested in and you want to improve the way you're doing your site visits currently, join us over on YouTube for the full video. Hi guys, Tamari here, the founder of drawfence.com and also a 25-year veteran of the fence industry. And I started out as a commercial estimator and project manager many years ago in South Africa, and I've worked in North America as well. And one of the things that I was responsible for as an estimator, and as you would know if you work in that area of the fence world, a lot of what we do is interpreting not just the specifications, but also the scope of work and the site conditions on a particular job site to come up with an accurate estimate. If you were putting up a fence on a sunny day on a flat site that was easy to access, that was secure, and that had all the amenities you would need, your price would be the ideal price. But we all know that project sites are very rarely like that. There's always something that complicates matters, whether it's needing to have your vehicle inspected before you enter a job site, which takes an hour out of your day every day, or something else that you need to be aware of when you are estimating the project. There's a lot of things that go into creating an accurate fence estimate, and it's not always written out in the specifications and so on. So, a lot of fence companies find that when they're doing all the site visits themselves, they've just started out, they're very small, things are a lot easier because it's just the owner or operator of the company, and he's got a notebook and he takes notes of everything, and he's got full control over everything. But at some point, fence companies grow. If they're doing things correctly, they're going to grow. They might have multiple estimators, they might have various people doing site visits, and things get a bit chaotic. Sometimes you even have an estimator who leaves mid estimate. And then somebody's got to pick that up and do the bid or the quote or whatever it is. So once you have that kind of situation going, things get a lot harder because it's not just one person's memory that you need to rely on. It's multiple people involved, and information and data and all of those things are going to make all the difference between having a profitable job or getting losing your shirt on something. So you really need to make sure that you are getting all the information about your job site so that you can do a accurate estimate of the project every time. And the one way that I've found to do that is to have a formal site visit report. So what this is it's just a form that has questions that are relevant to the job site, so that whoever's doing the site visit, and sometimes you might be sending someone else to do a site visit because you have two booked at the same time, or there's a mandatory site visit that you can't attend personally, so you have to send someone else. So that's when this comes in really handy. And even for yourself, just to remember what you need to be taking note of, having something formalized in a document that you can just check off different things that you need to factor into your pricing is such a game changer. And that's why I started using site visit reports a very long time ago. I used to do them. I had an Excel sheet that I used to print out on paper and get my people, when they were doing a site visit for me, to fill in, or I would fill it in myself. And it had a section where you could do your layout drawing and so on. So it was kind of low tech, but it still gave us something that was that we could use to generate accurate estimates. So, really, what these forms are designed to do is to make sure that all the relevant information that you need to gather on a site is gathered, and also to make sure that the person doing the site visit pays attention to those things, because there's always going to be situations where you need to contact someone who's done a site visit for you and ask some questions. And if they're looking at a form where those questions are already asked, it's already going to be in their mind. It's already going to be something that they're going to pay attention to. They might even take pictures of it or whatever for you. So that's what this form is really for. And also just so that you can start the life cycle documentation for the project. So projects, in my opinion, everything should be written down at some point. You should have a written record of everything that happens on every project from day one, actually from before day one, because your site visit report will happen before the project actually starts. It's part of your pre-construction. And you really want to keep that documentation so that it can be used both during the project and after the project. There's a lot of times when documentation really only comes into play after a project is finished, if there's a dispute or something like that. So you want to make sure that you keep all of that paperwork and information secure somewhere. And I really like digital storage these days. I use OneDrive, I use whatever I can to make sure that I have all my documentation saved somewhere where it's always accessible. Because again, paperwork is great, but if it gets wet or if it gets lost or if someone is angry about something and they just simply destroy it, that could lead to big complications for your company. So, yeah, create a document. We have got a document that we're going to go through in a minute, that's built into DrawFence that will automatically save onto our platform. That makes it really easy for anyone to generate a site visit report from any device, from any site that's got an internet connection. And then also make sure that whoever's going to the job site does things like site layout drawings where they mark up where certain factors are a problem or where there's an obstacle or something like that. Um, Ask them to take pictures, photographs. I mean, we've all got cell phones in our pockets these days. You might as well make use of those and get all the information that way. Um, and yeah, and just gather as much information at the site visit so that you have all the information you need to build an accurate estimate, because estimates really are so much more than just somebody says, oh, I want a 6-foot fence, and you go sure, and you put it into an estimating platform and it pops out a price. If it was that simple, we'd all be making a lot more money all the time. But the better you get at gathering information ahead of the estimating process, and the better you get at recording that information so that it can be used during the estimating process, the more money you're going to make as a fence company. So in the next section of this video, we're going to look through the site visit sheet that we've built into drawfence.com for our users. Like I said, you can build any sheet you want. You can use a duplicate book like we did back in the day, whatever it is, as long as it's written down and it addresses all the important questions. It's going to help you to dial in your estimating better and deliver a better price to your customer that actually takes everything into account. So be sure to stay tuned for that part, and we'll see you again in another episode of What the Form. Right, so now that you know why you should get into the habit of documenting all your site visits and site visit notes, whether you do them yourself and it's for yourself later when you're estimating the bid, or sometime in the future when somebody needs to go back and see what the site visit notes said. I'm a big fan of documenting everything because you never know when you're going to need it. But you also might be busy and you can't make it to a site visit that's happening at the same time as another one, and it's a mandatory site visit, so you have to send someone. This kind of documentation helps to make sure that that person is getting you all the information you need to do your estimate properly. And I know from 25 years of experience as an estimator myself, it's very difficult to get these things right if you don't have the right information. So I'm going to show you very quickly what our site visit report looks like, the one that's on DrawFence that our users can use. You can create your own forms and use them however you want to. A very long time ago, back in the day, I used to use paper forms for this. I've also used sort of pre-printed duplicate books and stuff like that. Problem I have with that is they tend to come back wet and with footprints on them because they've been on the floor of somebody's truck, and half of the information is smudged, and then they still can't give you the photographs that go with the site visit report. So they've got to email those to you separately, and then they get lost somewhere, and it's just a bit of a nightmare. So that's why we built this form on DrawFence, so that it's easy, it's all in one place, it automatically saves into your My Files sort of document repository, so you can always find it. It automatically emails to whoever's on the My Company profile that you select over here, like every other document on DrawFence. Whoever's email is in there in the chosen user profile that you're putting on there, and remember that you can have 3 on DrawFence for each account. It'll automatically send to that person. So you could have someone go to a job site that needs a site visit and log into your drawer, finish the report, and as soon as they're generated, it'll send an email to you. So they can do that from their phone or their tablet or whatever it might be. And you can also have 3 user instances logged in at a time on DrawFence. So you could still be using DrawFence in the office while somebody's doing that on site. So that's quite a nice little feature there. So again, you would go and set up your company information and your logo, and that's just a template, a uniform layout, so that they look the same, they look like they come from the same place. It's just part of what we see as marketing and branding for fence companies. When the forms and documents that you do all look the same, your customers start to see that as a sort of a branding thing for you. So you'd select your user that you want to receive this site visit report, and then you would put in your client's name, their project, and I'm going to go SVR3. All of our forms do have these prefixes as well. So SVR, site visit report. If you were doing a FLHA, it would obviously be FLHA, whatever the number is, and so on. And that's just so that you can find those documents easier when you go to My Files, and I'm going to show you that part of it in a second. And then revision number for most documents, that would be 0 in most cases. So I've actually got some cached information in here because I used this form earlier. So I'm just going to leave this customer contact, their email, their phone number, the site address. You could even copy a Google Maps URL and paste it in there so that whoever's receiving this document can go and see exactly what it is and look on Google Earth and so on and so on and so on. And then you've got your quote deadline, which is optional. So if it's a bid that needs to be in by a certain date, that would be there. Or maybe the customer says, I need this quote by next Tuesday or whatever it is. So the person can put in that date over there. And then the person who's completing the report. Now, it might seem weird to put your own name on here, but sometimes, again, when you're doing 25 or 30 different bids and quotes and things like that, you might forget that you were the one who did the site visit. So, you could always put your own name in there if you need to. Otherwise, whoever's doing the site visit for you can just type in their name, and that's useful if you need to contact them and ask them questions and stuff like that. Then, to make this as easy as possible, we have built in some of the more common things that estimators need to know in order to estimate the costs that are not related to fence specifications. So things like site conditions. And we've got easy to use little drop downs over here so people can check off what they saw on site and so on. So, and it explains exactly what each one of those is. And then also the reason why we've built all these questions and things into here is so that it's a uniform thing and people are reminded to pay attention to those things. Very often, if you're just writing up notes and stuff like that, you'll leave things out because you don't remember that you're supposed to put it in there or whatever it is, or you don't pay attention to it because you didn't know you needed to or whatever. And this is especially true if you are having someone who's not an estimator do a site visit for you. They probably know a lot about fences. I've in the past used foremen and people like that to do site visits for me, but they might not know the estimating side as well as they could, and that's why all of these things being built into your form, whether you use the DrawFence forms or whether you build your own, it's very useful to have all of those things in there so they are reminded that they need to pay attention to that. Same thing for obstacles. Again, just like drop downs of what you want to, like what they want to tell you about everything. And then I'm just going to select random things here so that I can build a sheet and you can see what it looks like. Okay, and then soil conditions. Obviously, none of us can see what's happening under the ground, but we do want people to have a look and see if there's anything that needs to kind of be highlighted. So, appears easy, appears sandy. Sandy's not a bad thing, but it does tend to collapse in on itself. So then you know you might need to have formwork and those kinds of things, or shoring and so on. Appears waterlogged. Maybe you need to use screw piles instead of concrete. Visible rocks, maybe you need to make a mention of that. So just so that people know that digging might not be that easy. So you can just check off all those things. And then there is a box for other, so they can check that off. If there's something they really need to tell you, they can put it into the comments, or you can contact them and say, look, why did you say other over there? Next, we're going to go with underground services, and we're just going to say unknown. So we don't know what's going on there. We don't know who's planning to scan it. We just know that nobody knows what's going on. Overhead obstructions. This is an issue often if you can't use certain equipment. You can't use a lift. You can't use um, certain ladders, maybe because there's power lines above you, and so on and so on. That's something you need to know because that's going to affect the cost to install that fence. Comments about the site. This is just free typing, so you can type whatever you need to type in there, and I've just put in a little note there, whatever. Site amenities. Again, this is a hidden cost item on a lot of fence projects. So you don't have water on site, you need to have barrels, or you need to have a water truck, or you need to have whatever it might be. So we've got here no, yes, which means potable, which means you can drink it. Yes, non-potable means you can make concrete with it, but you can't necessarily drink it. Power on site, again, just tells you if you're going to need to potentially have generators or battery operated tools or whatever the case may be. Um, Secure storage. Is there somewhere where you can put your materials where they're not going to be damaged or stolen? If not, you need to maybe have temp fence or whatever it might be. So those are all things that are going to contribute to the cost of your project. Toilets on site, whether they don't have any, whether they have portables or whether they have regular toilets. Again, that's something that you might need to make an arrangement for, unless maybe there's a gas station close by that your crew can go to when they need to go. So these are things you need to know when you're doing the estimates so you can factor them into your pricing. So I'm just going to add that. And then this one is a modern one. Wasn't such a factor when I first started in the industry, but obviously we want to know is there connectivity on site, because can they do their draw fence site visit report from site, or do they need to go somewhere nearby to do it? So let's go mobile average. Next is site requirements, and this is usually a factor on bigger commercial, industrial, government sites, and so on. These are the contractual things that you have to do in order to be able to work on that site. So we've got things like orientation. A lot of sites require your whole crew to do a training session where they have site-specific training. And of course, you need to factor that into your labor calculations, because if they're sitting doing training, they're not installing fences. Then tickets required. I'm just going to go none, but you can check off whatever needs to be checked off there. And then hot work. Do they need to have hot work permits? Do they need to have suppression measures on site? Fall protection. I'm going to say no, but whether you need it and who's supplying it. Drag and alcohol testing, another big factor, because maybe your fastest crew won't be able to qualify for that particular site. And the same goes for criminal record checks. Sometimes certain crew members might not be able to work on certain job sites. Next up, we got images. And the first one is a layout sketch, which I actually did on the Draw Fence layout tools. So I've drawn that over here. And that's a very easy drag and drop little editor type thing, so you can do drawings. Um, One of the things, whether you use that tool or whether you just take a picture and upload it from your phone or whatever, it's always good to mark up those fence lines with whether this one is sloped and this one needs clearing, and so on and so on. And the nice thing on our little tool that we've got here is you can use different colors. So you can do fence lines where there's an existing fence in green, and fence lines where there's no existing fence in red, and so on and so on and so on. And then it just makes it really easy to add those notes and say anything that's green is going to be no clearing. Anything that is red is going to require fence removal, and so on and so on. As you can see, when I'm uploading image files here, I am selecting and then uploading. And these are just some nonsense files that I downloaded from the internet just to use for testing purposes. But you can just upload whatever from your phone, from whatever device you're using. It's really simple. So upload that one. And we've given you space to put 10 images in there. And of course, these do embed into the document, so you don't have to attach anything when you send the email. And as soon as I generate this document, it's actually going to send the email to the recipient that is listed on the profile that's been chosen. So let's just generate that document. There we go. Okay, so we've got our site inspection report. Oh, did I not choose the correct logo there? Oh, there we go. It just took a while to load. Okay, so as you can see, the report completed by name is over here right at the top, and this is the email that is going to be sent to, and then it's going to give you all that information that you've put in there. So everything that you've selected and so on, it's going to put into this different areas of this report, and then it's going to upload all those images and everything, and of course there's empty lines because I didn't upload the full 10 images. But once I'm done with this report, I can go and generate a PDF of it, and then I can either download that for myself, or I can print it out, or whatever I need to do with it. And that's what it's going to look like when it's sent. This is also the attachment that's going to be sent to whoever the recipient that you've selected is. So they're going to get this full attachment with all of this information and the embedded images and so on and so on. Really nice, really easy, really comprehensive, and you can't really forget anything. That's the important part about all of this. Now I have created this file and I've called it, what have I called it? SVR3. Right, so I'm going to go to my files now. And the My Files section of DrawFence is really nice for our users because this is something that stores all your files, but nobody can delete anything. So there's our files that we've just created now, and I'm just going to go and download the file. I generated it twice, that's why I've got two instances there. That's okay, it's not the end of the world. Rather two files than no files. So there we go. That's going to be saved forever. For as long as you have access to your DrawFence account, you'll be able to access that file. You'll be able to find it. You can filter this further by the project name, by the client name, by the doc number, by the revision number, and so on and so on. But those little prefixes that we've given you for these different documents, that is kind of very useful for this because it helps you to, even if you don't know what the number is, if you were to just go SVR, for instance, you could look up all of the SVRs that you've got stored in the system and you'll report that way. So you don't have to use DrawFence for anything. You don't have to use it for your site visit reports or so on, whatever. But I do think that setting up a site visit report like this that has all of these questions, where even if they say no to something, at least they're thinking about it and they're paying attention to it, and they know that that's something that they've got to tell you about. So if you put all of those things in there, it makes it easy for someone to do the site visit and give you all the information you need to sort of prepare an accurate quote. Because obviously you're going to have a specification and a scope of work and so on and so on, but a lot of the time it's these little things that you pick up on the site itself that is actually going to make all the difference. So that's our review of the site visit report we've got on DrawFence. You can always set something up yourself. You can always use paper copies and so on. We just did this for convenience and really to solve all the problems that I've had for the last 25 years. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back with another episode of What the Form.